It is 3 o'clock in the morning, and the sisters of the Order of the Cistercians of the Strict Observance, or Trappistines, as they are commonly called, are beginning their day. A rhythm of life rooted in prayer, reading and studying sacred scripture, Lectio Divina as it is called, and work, all of it steeped in a deep contemplative tradition of silence and solitude. These Trappistine sisters live their lives in obscurity, hidden from the world in a life that is as mysterious as it is genuine, and all for only one reason: God. The monastic rule of Saint Benedict, dating back to the 5th century, is the foundation of life at Mount St. Mary's Abbey, located about 40 miles southwest of Boston. Life here is a continual prayer, whether meditating and praying in church, spending time in Lectio Divina in the quiet early morning hours of the day. Or working in their state-of-the-art, high-tech candy factory. Everything is centered on fostering a deep, personal relationship with Jesus Christ.
It really is a way of having nothing in the world but God.
There is the sense that this is where I can find God. This is where I can grow towards Him.
He's my companion. I mean, it's not that I see him, but he's always with me. He's in my heart. He's in my sisters. He's in what happens.
God would be the one in my life, the one name, the one reality before all other.
Day unto day, night unto night, season after season, life for the Trappistines is disciplined, and yet remarkably routine, all of it filled with an extraordinary wonder and awe of God. Ever present, part of the air they breathe, a divine presence which is unmistakable and permanent. Life in this cloistered monastery is all about preferring nothing but Jesus Christ, living in what the sisters call a school of mutual love, trying to find Christ in every moment of every day.
So it's not like as if you're living up in the sky, but it does have a magic to it. I mean, it is a little bit of heaven. It is truly. And I think that it really makes you realize more and more that there is such a place as heaven, because it has begun a little bit here and now.
When you followed the call you believe, you have to be happy, whether you're single or married or religious or consecrated life, because that's what you're made for.
I come from being independent, an achiever, into a place where a lot of those things have to be let go so that I can become who not somebody who does, but somebody who just is. And that transition is hard. But the balance comes when I ask myself, why did you come? It's Him. Who do you seek? It's Him. Why do you stay? I can't live without Him.
Sister Francesca, what do you seek?
O God, you are my God. For you I long. For you my soul is thirsting.
After more than a half-dozen years of formation here at Mount St. Mary's, Sister Francesca Maria Molino is making her solemn profession. This is the day she takes what are called her final vows to enter fully into the community. Today marks a culmination of one thing.
Yes, I will follow you and love you all the days of my life. My heart is ready, O God. My heart is ready.
The desire to be with God. There would be no other reason to leave everything, to leave your family, to leave a good job. I had everything I could want. I lacked nothing. And yet it wasn't enough. I wanted to know God, to really know God, to really dedicate all of my energy to that, and how to do that. And then God provided me with this vocation.
You have to give up these things you get attached to just to go into unknown spaces where God is. And that's probably the hardest.
Will you strive constantly for perfect love of God and neighbor by zealously following the Gospels and the rule of our Father, Saint Benedict, as lived in this community?
I will.
But I know that even being here, that I'm serving the great needs of the world in a very hidden way. But that is my vocation, and I didn't choose it. I know that for sure. It wasn't that I decided to enter a monastery. It was that God asked this of me, or God offered it to me, and I just said yes.
It's a life that's 100% community and 100% solitude, not 50-50. As you grow in it, you realize that the heart of community and the heart of a true solitude is communion with others.
If God was asking this of me, and God had a plan for how I could serve the world and to know Him more closely, who was I to say, I have a better plan, thank you very much. I'll try something else.
Will you, by the grace of the Holy Spirit, live for God alone in solitude and silence, and spend your life with your sisters, persevering in prayer and generous service?
I will.
You can have a profound communion with others in the silence, because the silence is about communion with God, where you're meeting Jesus alone and you're meeting Jesus in others, but it's always meeting Him and being with Him.
May God, who has begun this good work in you, bring it to fulfillment in the day of Christ Jesus. Amen.
Living a monastic life requires balance, finding God throughout the day, whether it is during prayer, study, or work. Here at Mount St. Mary's, the sisters support themselves by making candy. Trappistine quality candy is sold all over the world. This is a state-of-the-art, highly regulated facility. Here the sisters change out of their habits into work clothing, designed to maintain the plant's sterile environment. The mission of finding God in all things and sharing in the divine work of creation is the foundation of their labor.
I believe very strongly that this job that I've been given is my way of living out the vows that I made to God and to the community. To serve the community, to serve God, to serve the people of the world too. And the more difficult it is to do that, the more it goes against the grain somehow, or the more it just seems impossible, the more it's God's way of leading me forward. And God's way of teaching me to lean on Him, which is really placing myself in God's hands. And so I trust and I believe that He has His hand in all of it.
And in order for the life to really work, there has to be a balance, so that you can't pray too much and not work. It's measured so that the whole day is balanced. But after a while, the life becomes a whole. I mean, at the beginning, when you come to our life, you can't wait to get work finished so that you can come into church and pray. But after a while, your prayer seeps in, to your work and to everything else, so that after a while, it's like a seamless garment in a way.
I think that the balance between work and prayer is something I'll be learning more about in the years to come, because the longer you're here, the more responsibilities you assume. I'm always very edified by the way some sisters manage to balance huge responsibilities and their prayer life very effortlessly. I have a feeling that's going to be a learning curve for me, because I'm a very big accomplisher, and letting things go or not doing that one more thing that I could do is extremely challenging for me.
For me, fitting together prayer and work is a huge issue in my life, and an area where there is no little conflict and difficulty, especially now. I think up until now, I wouldn't say that I found a harmony and a balance to my satisfaction. It pushes the envelope, and it makes me realize that if I want to be a person of prayer, and if I want to grow in this continual awareness of God's presence, which is our call, then I really need to work at it.
For more than 60 years, candy making has been the main source of income for the sisters. They came here from Ireland in 1949. Back then, the community relied on bread making and a herd of dairy cows for the income they needed. That changed in the mid-1950s when the sisters terminated the bread industry and added the candy business to the herd of dairy cows. 4 American sisters were among the sisters sent from the Abbey of Glencairn, who established the foundation at Mount St. Mary's, which became the first monastery of Trappistine Sisters in the United States. Sister Carol Holohan is the only founder still living.
I'm 91. I'll soon be 92.
Sister Carol remembers clearly. Back then, the sisters knew nothing about making candy.
Candy. We had a dear friend, Joseph Crand, the man who first helped us out. It was his candy department, and he helped us make caramels. We had no machinery. We just wrapped them by hands. But we managed to make it, and then we expanded, and then we got very big.
Now, in the autumn of her life, Sister Carol still finds meaning in the silence and solitude of the monastery.
Well, first of all, you have an attraction to God, and even an intimate relationship with Him. You wouldn't be parted from it for any reason whatever. That's your life.
Life here at the Abbey is a simple one. 7 times during the day, the sisters gather together to pray. Vigils begins at 3:20 every morning. Then, in what is called the Great Silence, the sisters bask in the quiet and devote an hour or more to prayer and Lectio Divina.
To you, O God, his almighty Father, giving you thanks, he said the blessing, broke the bread, and gave it to his disciples, saying, "Take this, all of you, and eat of it, for this is my body, which will be given up for you."
Every day includes the celebration of Mass.
That's not terrible, but you want more to be a little bit more free on this and to link the whole phrase together. Vidisti seum. Just try that little phrase together, sitting down.
Singing practices are frequent.
No, together, all together. We'll stand up otherwise. Here we go. Now, I hear nothing coming up from this side. Have you resigned or what? Here we go. Dum.
Once a month, the sisters joyfully work with their chant master, Father Gabriel, a Trappist monk from St. Joseph's Abbey in nearby Spencer, Massachusetts.
Everybody. Go on. Okay, now two things. Number one, the tem, you're rushing. Ascendentem, ascendentem.
Throughout each day, the sisters' steady rhythm of life continues.
I know how much you have been enjoying hearing each one's vocation story, and so today we're going to hear from one of our newest members, Jennifer.
Good afternoon, everyone. So when I was in the 4th grade, and at that point I met a religious sister for the first time in my life, and she was a Dominican, and within the first few weeks of school, I went home and said to my mother, I want to be a sister like Sister Anthony. And she was sort of like, who are you? You can't be my child because we are not that type of family, okay? And so it's like, yes, I'm not sure what I'm going to do, but I want to do something big and important for God. I have long desired to know God more deeply and more fully. And it's in Ephesians, to know the love of Christ, which is beyond understanding. And I've sort of been holding that with me for many months now, to know more deeply the love of Christ that is beyond understanding. And I was like, I want to be a Trappistine nun. Like, this is it. And my parents were like, you definitely have gone crazy. like, so they were like, stay in school, Jennifer.
The end of their day arrives in the early evening and is marked by the final period of prayer called Confronting, which starts at 7:05. Then off to bed, and some 7 hours later, another day of prayer, Lectio Divina, and work will begin. Each sister sleeps in a small room called a cell. It is austere and uncluttered. Only a crucifix hangs on the wall. Meals are shared together in the monastery's refectory. While one sister may read sacred and inspired writings, the community eats in silence.
May individual dioceses organize missions to the people, that his judgment is severe and unjust and meaningless in light of the Father's boundless mercy.
The formation of the sisters is rigorous. Some come here and spend many years discerning whether God might be calling them to this Cistercian vocation.
Instead of interrupting and filling in the spaces, to be comfortable with what seems like God's silence and wait for Him to say to us what He really wants to say, because the silence is a big part of the conversation. It's learning to listen until the true words come up.
These young women are in the early stages of formation. They are learning about the demanding discipline involved in fully embracing the silence and solitude. Sister Katie McNamara is the director of vocations.
It was very clear to me that God was calling me, and it came from deep inside my heart, and there was no way that I could say no. I had believed from the very start, as a very young woman, that I had been called by the greatest lover the world has ever known into the greatest love affair that has ever existed, and that once you've fallen in love with God, there's no way that you can't follow. I cannot imagine living any other way except this life here. It holds everything for me that I have always wanted. I think I had always been looking for it, but never really knew where to find it. And when I stepped across the threshold here of this abbey 25 years ago, I knew that this is home and that this is where I belonged.
The Trappistines at Mount St. Mary's are an international community. Many of the journeys ending up here began in many different parts of the world.
I was born in England and I grew up in Wales.
I come from a small town in Bavaria.
Originally Scotland.
Born and raised until I was 13 years old. I was in Brazil, São Paulo.
I'm from Australia. I come from Queensland.
But they all ended up here, knowing one thing for certain. It was God who called them to this life. In recalling how God touched their lives so deeply and so visibly, the sisters are thoughtful and reflective, slow to speak what is etched so deeply in their hearts.
You know, all of the sisters have very little in common, except that they've all been called to live this life. But that's so huge that we've all agreed that we will come here and do our best to put aside everything that does not lead to God and to help each other to do that. It's not really something you can do alone. I'm originally from Wisconsin. I'm a fairly recent convert to the Catholic faith, so I had very little religious instruction growing up, you would say. I didn't know about prayer, I didn't know about scripture, I never went to church, I wasn't baptized, all the rest of that. I don't know where it came from, but I always had a deep conviction that there was another world other than this one that I couldn't see, and that there were people there waiting for me, and that I had to figure out how to get there. I don't know where that came from. Nobody ever would have said anything like that to me. But I had a clear sense of something existing beyond what was in front of my face, beyond what I could see. And as I grew up, that clarified for me a little bit more into not just a world, but a person. I think I was around 17 when I became aware of a very distinct presence in my life that I would call a personal presence, not just a general, but a personal and loving presence. All I can say is that I knew very much that I was loved by someone infinitely lovable. And although I wouldn't have used the word God because I didn't grow up with that word, I knew that my life needed to be about finding out about that person. And I always promised myself that if I ever did find out more about that person, that I would give up everything to be with him. I did not envisage this when I was thinking about that, but for me, it was always kind of an all or nothing proposition, that this was the most important thing in my heart, and that if I could ever find expression for that, if I could ever find a place where other people knew about that and could help me find this person, that would be the place where I should be. And that turned into a monastic vocation.
I grew up in Virginia. I grew up with my younger brother and younger sister, mom and dad. We're still a very tight-knit, close family. I think the seed was planted quite young in me. At a Sunday Mass, I was maybe 12 or 13. A woman got up at the end of Mass and said, "We're looking for new volunteers. We have this organization in our parish, and we get together once a week and we pray. And there's also a component of service, and the members also pray the rosary every day." And my heart was so drawn to that, and there was something in me, even at that age, where I really wanted to pray more. Going to Mass wasn't enough. Going to daily Mass wasn't enough. Going to daily Mass and prayer after Mass, after work, was not enough. I just needed more. And I know that God has called me here, and I could live. I could get another job. I could find great housemates again, but it wouldn't be enough. It wouldn't be enough.
I am a Jewish convert. We were a conservative Jewish family. I mean, we had a kosher home. I went to Hebrew school. But by the time I was a sophomore in college, it was all put aside. I mean, I wanted nothing to do with it. I was experiencing intense spiritual hunger. And I used to walk around, and these wordless melodies would come up from my depths, like lamentations. I mean, I was crying to God, and I didn't know him. And I was starving. My soul was starving. I was starving for the Eucharist. Of course, I didn't know it back then, but I mean, it was God's mercy that really, did it. I didn't know what was happening. It was only in hindsight that I could see. But that was where he pulled me. It was an inner hunger.
My vocation really begins at the beginning of my life, I have to say. I don't remember a time when I didn't have a sense of God, have some desire for God. And while I was in college, it was the beginning of my sophomore year that I first explicitly had a sense of call to the religious life. It happened after a period of searching, questioning, finding my identity as an adult, living separately from my parents, having the opportunity for the first time to practice my faith of my own volition, as it were, and coming to realize that my desire for God was a very significant part of my life. And so literally one day, taking a walk, it popped into my head, why not be a nun? And what that meant for me at that time, really, when I looked into it, was to be consecrated to God, to belong to God. That was what I desired.
When I was a very young nun, I entered at 19. Deep within me, I felt he may have been calling me to a contemplative life, but I loved my order and I loved teaching. So I sort of put it on the back burner. And then I went to teach in northwestern Australia with the Aboriginals people, and it was just heavenly. They were so simple, and I remember it so clearly. I remember saying to God as I walked across the grass in the heat, very, very hot, I said to God, I'm just so happy. It was just a beautiful school, beautiful situation. And I heard deep within my heart, but you haven't given me everything yet. So I knew that was the time that I had to be honest with myself and with someone else and speak about it to someone else to get guidance. And that's when the journey towards the contemplative life started.
I was discerning what would life look like if God did rule in me. And the answer that gradually came to me was amazing. I would know that God is, that God lives, because he would stand with all the power of his might and goodness in my soul, and I would experience him as the Holy One. Love would fulfill its divine destiny between God and me alone, and yet include all mankind. This was, for me, a very fundamental thought that would lead me towards a search of God and deeper spiritual growth, and brought me finally in touch with a monastic life.
But I loved the silence and the peace, and it was so beautiful. Then I had an experience of God, and that was really where I got my vocation. I mean, I hadn't visited any religious orders or anything, but the experience was that God was love, God existed, and God was real. If I had wings, I would have flown away. I mean, I felt so light and like as if it was a new day, and everything seemed to change.
Right after college, I needed something else. I was very active in my church, my parish, but it wasn't enough. I wanted to give more of my life, not necessarily religious life either. I just wanted more of me to him. But I came and I thought, this is nice, but you wouldn't be really calling me to this. This is not my background. This is not it. Because I was from the charismatic renewal background, jump, dance, put your hands up in the air, that kind of thing. But 3 years into the search and visiting different communities, I couldn't get the place out of my mind. The image of our altar, the sisters, everything just came and it was steady. But when that image of that altar came, it was something from in, out. It was more than I could resist. So I had to say yes and take a step forward.
I had a very distinct sense that this was the place that Jesus was calling me to. It happened, I wouldn't say the moment I walked across the threshold. The monastic spirituality, certain aspects touched me in particular, but one most of all, really, and that was, as our constitutions put it, only if the sisters prefer nothing whatever to Christ will they be happy to persevere in a life that is ordinary, obscure, and laborious. And I knew when I heard that I wanted nothing more than Christ, and that this was a place where I could pursue that with others who were similarly oriented.
Cistercian spirituality demands the sisters take time to pray and also take time to work.
Our life is geared to finding God in every aspect of our life, but God just reveals himself in a setting like this.
Balance is the key to making it all work together.
Our younger sisters find it very valuable to do strenuous work and to interact with living things.
You know, I don't see work and prayer as two very different things. For me, it's like a many-faceted diamond, and so the sun shines on maybe working in the infirmary, maybe working in the business office, maybe private prayer, maybe serving someone. Basically, when I serve others, I feel closer to God in prayer. So when serving, when called to even do the dishes quietly, that to me is being with Jesus, and that to me is what prayer is about. It's like a one beautiful diamond that the sun shines all over the place.
I do find more and more that I don't feel work is as separate from prayer as I did when I first came here. But I think work is a very important grounding influence for me. I like that we do manual labor. I like that we do things with our hands. You do something you can feel and touch and see.
Candy work is primary, the work that we do. But so mornings, usually I do candy work. And then in the afternoon, it varies. I do grounds with Sister Jane. I work with the sheep once or twice a week. And I have what's called a compost charge, which I take care of all the buckets with all the leftover foods in the compost.
Our work is often very quiet and simple, manual, very repetitive types of work. It very much just frees your mind to be able to think about God, just to really be present. If I am coding munch, am I really present, or am I thinking about what I'm going to do when candy work is over, or this afternoon, or tonight, or what I need to do later? Do you know, am I really in this moment? And one of the beautiful things about the silence at work is really being able to remember, I am here to be with God, and is that what I'm doing in this moment? Or am I thinking about everything else besides what I am doing? Work and prayer aren't separated. Just because I'm working doesn't mean I'm not still attentive to God or why I'm in the monastery or attentive to my vocation.
I'm a workaholic. I love to work. So again, the transition between working out in the world and working here is very different. I liked 9-10-hour shifts because I could get a lot done. Here it's 2 to 2.5 hour shifts, and if you're not done, the bell rang, you gotta go. So work becomes a way to prayer. So sometimes I need it because of the physical activity, and that helps the mind. But sometimes it just creates an environment that I can just have a conversation with God. My favorite job is the compost charge. There's nothing to it that will distract me from trying to pray and to have that conversation with God. And even if a little bit of pride starts to sneak in, all I have to do is take a big sniff, and I know exactly where I am, and I can go back to where I need to be. I've been falling in love with the Psalms. And so for me, work, especially because it's not a mind work, it helps me to memorize the Psalms and to just recite it.
The reality is that the call to love God in the cloister of the monastery means the Trappistines will have limited contact with anyone beyond the boundaries of the Abbey. That is one of the most difficult parts of answering the call.
It was quite difficult and painful. Our family is quite tight-knit. So to have this profound experience of God calling me to something that I really couldn't even put into words, and then to try to explain that to my family when on some level all they could see was I'm leaving. I'm leaving and there's going to be this great separation, and I can't talk to you whenever I want to. I can't visit you whenever I want to. It was quite painful. It was quite painful.
I didn't know I'd be so lonely when I came. Loneliness has led me closer to Jesus because he's helping me in those moments. So when anyone asks me, why did you do it? There's only one reason in my life, and the reason is love. It's why I entered at the beginning when I was young. It's why I followed this vocation, which I didn't realize would be quite as hard leaving my country as it was. And I remember my mother was very upset because she said, you're leaving your country, your family, the order you love, for something you know nothing about. And I said, yes, because I know the reason is love, and the love of Jesus, obviously. And that's what's held me all the way along, and the ups and downs, the valleys and the mountains and the rivers that we've had to cross. But he's the core love, so that wherever I've been on the journey of life, he's been waiting there. Even if I wander a little bit, he'll be there waiting to call me back. And so that's the reason, and that's why I'm here.
Living a regimented life of silence and solitude is not easy. Confronting and embracing the silence is a significant challenge.
That was something that attracted me before I came. It was also something that terrified me in some way. When I was an observer, I came for 6 weeks to live with the sisters before entering, to have an experience of the life more intimately. And during that time, I was struck with a mortal terror of solitude and silence, and of the kind of integrity that demands. There is a real responsibility. There's a formation that comes. But at that time, it was a moment of fear and trembling, and just this deep down conviction that this is the way, walk in it.
We're formed not to be afraid to be silent together. It's a solitude of the heart, not of the body, and you carry it around with you all the time.
For me, I love it. I love it when I'm alone. Something happens inside your heart that you become almost true to yourself, true to myself.
I love being hidden. I want to be hidden in God's heart. That's where I live. That's where I want to be.
The sisters all confess that another reality of their life is confronting their own weaknesses and the ever-present duty to grow in virtue.
The toughest part is to see yourself so clearly, to see everything in yourself that is not yet converted, and that might not be for a long time, if ever, this side of the grave. To see that and to trust still that you are loved, not just by God, but by your sisters who see it too. It's there for everyone to see, to trust also in their mercy and their compassion.
Going into those unknowns when God's will reveals itself as something different is like jumping off a cliff, And obedience is a really central thing. where we really believe in faith, that your life is not your own.
The most difficult part is being called beyond my comfort zone in terms of interpersonal relationships, which reveal that which in me is in the way, which prevents me from loving my sisters as I should.
One of the most difficult things is just accepting yourself as you are before God and growing, always growing. Growing can be difficult, and seeing things in yourself that you'd rather not.
This is a life in which God is determined to make us like Jesus.
We want to live in peace together, to give our life credibility, and to really live it before God, that God can make it a blessing for the world.
And he puts us in a community and with sisters who we would never choose. And the interactions and the happenings and the trials are all meant to fashion Christ in us.
My mom said a long time ago, people are saying you've escaped, to a peaceful life. And I said, well, it's not really an escape, because we have this vow of stability. And so if you're not getting along with someone, you can't get out of the situation. You have to really work through it. And she said, you mean the sisters don't get along with each other? People don't realize that it's real life. And that you bring, and everyone else brings, their own unfinished selves. And that we're willing to commit to each other to grow and to allow other people to grow, but that's very painful. So it's a struggle, the journey. But at the heart of it is this tremendous groundedness in Christ.
The best part in this life is that we are called to prayer.
What's the best part? Being hidden with God, with all these wonderful other people who are all on the same journey, who have God as the main focus of their life.
Being invited to know Jesus Christ and to follow him and to become like him.
The best part, I think, would be the search for God. But the search for God is very mysterious, because it never turns out the way you plan, because God is always full of surprises.
The best part is knowing that I belong to the one for whom I looked for so long. I think what is most beautiful to me is the morning, the time between when we wake up at 3 and Lauds, which begins at 6:30. It's called the Great Silence, and it is a very, very great thing. It is a very great silence, and it's very real. It penetrates your heart the longer you're here. And I stay in church for about an hour and a half every morning, just in the darkness, just silently praying. I couldn't live without that. I'm not sure if I can tell you why in words, because sometimes it's very, it's very beautiful, and sometimes it just feels like I'm just there and nothing terribly exciting is happening. But regardless of how I feel about it, on a deeper level, it's feeding me, and I could never walk away from that.
In the mysterious, hidden life of the Trappistines, The reason they continue to cherish their life in the monastery is the reality of the divine love they know and experience so deeply. In the quiet, when as a community they pray and sing hymns of joy and thanksgiving, when they serve the sisters they live with, break bread with, and work with. From the mundane routine of the compost pile to the garden, pruning blueberries to stimulate the new, still sleeping springtime growth, to the barn, shepherding the sheep from which their wool will be used to make blankets. Theirs is a life of mission and purpose.
The purpose of our being here is to pray for the needs of the world. And there is such great suffering and such great need and pain in the world. And our response is just to embrace all of that. And in our own struggles, our own daily life, in a very mysterious way, we are separated and we are cloistered, and yet I feel that I serve just as importantly or just as powerfully as I did when I worked with the poor directly. I'm here to intercede. I'm here to pray for these people in need, for everyone. I know that this is the mission and the ministry that God has given me.
There is a flight to God, to the God who loved the world so much that he gave his only son. And I think the more we seek that God and the more we come to know that God, the more we desire to embrace the world that he loved so much.
When Jesus says that the one who gives up everything will get it back 100-fold, he isn't just using a figure of speech. It's a very real thing, and the longer I'm here and the more I let go of, the more I realize that you really do get it back in some way that's more beautiful than you could ever imagine, but you have to let go first.
For a long time, I was waiting for this certainty. I think I had this time of great uncertainty. Was God still asking this of me, or did he change his mind? But now it's quite clear. It's quite clear to me and to the community that God has called me here.
I had looked for this person for so long that when I finally found him and found that there was a place where I could give him everything, it was almost a foregone conclusion. I had been a seeker my whole life, that once I had found what I was seeking, it was an all or nothing thing. It was, this is you and I love you and I want to give you my life.
Star of sea and ocean, lead way to Dearest of all virgins, that our love be faithful, keep us from all evil, gentle, strong, and grateful.
To write a letter to ask to enter, and I couldn't write that letter. I couldn't put into words why it was that I wanted to come. And the last thought was, I can't live a long-distance relationship with you anymore, meaning with God. I want to end this. I don't want to go to Mass and then go to work and then go to visit a friend. I want you at all times.